The shattering of porcelain echoed through the marble hallway like a gunshot. Amelia Crawford froze, her heart plummeting to her stomach as she stared at the broken vase, an 18th-century Chinese artifact worth more than her entire year's salary. Trembling fingers reached for the scattered pieces, while her mind calculated how many months of rent this mistake would cost her. But it wasn't the financial loss that terrified her most. It was the look she knew would appear on Brandon Sutton's face when he discovered what she had done. "That was my wife's favorite." The cold voice behind her made Amelia's blood run cold. She hadn't heard him approach, his Italian leather shoes silent against the polished floor. Brandon Sutton stood in the doorway, his 6'2" frame casting a long shadow across the marble tiles. At 45 years old, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had built an empire from nothing. His tailored charcoal suit highlighted broad shoulders that seemed to bear the weight of invisible burdens, but it was his eyes that commanded attention, steel blue and utterly devoid of warmth, as if something vital had been extinguished in them long ago. "Mr. Sutton, I'm so incredibly sorry," Amelia began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was dusting, and you're fired." The words fell like an executioner's axe. "Margaret will provide your final payment on your way out. Clear your things within the hour." Without waiting for her response, he turned and walked away, leaving Amelia kneeling among the shattered remnants of both the vase and her employment. Tears welled in her eyes, not from the loss of the job she'd held for less than 3 days, but from the sheer injustice of it all. 4 housekeepers before her had met similar fates for equally minor transgressions: a water spot on a mirror, a single unfolded towel, a misplaced remote control. The Sutton mansion had become notorious among domestic workers in the affluent neighborhood, a revolving door of employment that no one could seem to navigate successfully. As Amelia gathered her meager belongings from the staff quarters, a small voice stopped her. "Are you leaving too?" Amelia turned to find a little girl standing in the doorway. Maya Sutton was 7 years old, with pale skin that seemed almost translucent, and deep brown eyes that appeared too large for her delicate face. But what struck Amelia most was the absence of hair on the child's head, completely bare save for the pink knit cap she clutched in her small hands. Despite this, there was something undeniably regal about her posture, a quiet dignity that children her age rarely possessed. "Yes, sweetheart," Amelia replied gently. "I'm afraid I am." Maya nodded solemnly, as if this was precisely the answer she had expected. "Daddy makes everyone leave. He says they don't do things right." She twisted the cap in her hands. "Was it because you broke something?" "The last lady left because she broke something too." "It was an accident," Amelia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Sometimes accidents happen." "Not in this house," Maya said, with the weary wisdom of someone far beyond her years. "Daddy says perfect people don't have accidents." Before Amelia could respond, the household manager Margaret appeared at the door. In her 60s, with steel-grey hair pulled back in a severe bun, Margaret had survived in the Sutton household longer than anyone else, partly because she enforced Mr. Sutton's impossible standards with military precision, and partly because she had been with the family since before the tragedy that had transformed Brandon Sutton from a demanding but fair employer into the tyrant he was today. "Maya, you shouldn't be here," Margaret said, her tone softening slightly when addressing the child. "Your father has rules about speaking to the staff, especially those who are leaving." "I was just saying goodbye," Maya whispered, her small fingers still working nervously at the fabric of her cap. "Well, now you have. Run along to your room. It's nearly time for your medication." Margaret waited until Maya had disappeared down the hallway before turning to Amelia. "Mr. Sutton has authorized your payment for the full week, despite your shortcomings. He's not entirely unreasonable." Amelia wanted to argue that firing someone for breaking a vase, no matter how valuable, was the very definition of unreasonable, but she needed the money too desperately to protest. "There's something you should know," Margaret continued, lowering her voice. "The position will be posted again tomorrow. He'll interview throughout the week." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the only one who's bothered to speak to Maya like a person and not just a sad story to whisper about." Margaret's eyes flickered down the hallway. "She has acute lymphoblastic leukemia, diagnosed 14 months ago, shortly after her mother died in a car accident. The treatments, they've been difficult." Amelia felt her heart constrict. That poor child. Mr. Sutton doesn't handle it well. The rules, the perfectionism, it's his way of controlling something when he feels powerless against her illness. Margaret's expression softened momentarily, revealing the compassion beneath her stern exterior. Apply again, under a different name. I'll make sure your application gets through. What? Why would I? Because that child needs someone who sees her, not just her disease. And because I have a feeling you're stubborn enough to stand up to him. Margaret handed Amelia an envelope with her payment. The choice is yours. 3 days later, Amelia found herself standing once again at the imposing gates of the Sutton estate. Her resume, now bearing the name Amy Collins, clutched tightly in her hand. Her practical mind told her this was madness. There were other jobs, other houses that wouldn't subject her to the emotional terrorism of Brandon Sutton's impossible standards. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Maya's face, those solemn eyes, and the quiet dignity with which she carried her suffering. The interview was conducted by Margaret, who maintained the pretense of meeting Amelia for the first time with Oscar-worthy conviction. By that afternoon, Amy Collins was hired as the new housekeeper for the Sutton mansion, with strict instructions about the rules of the household, chief among them being minimal interaction with Maya and absolutely no discussion of her illness. What Amelia didn't realize as she unpacked her things in the same staff quarters she had vacated days earlier was that she was stepping into a house where grief had calcified into cruelty, where love had become so entangled with fear that it was almost unrecognizable, and that before the seasons changed, she would shatter more than just a priceless vase. She would break through the walls that Brandon Sutton had built around his heart, walls that were keeping out not just pain, but the possibility of healing. As night fell over the mansion, Amelia stood at her window, watching as Brandon's silhouette appeared in his study. Even from a distance, she could see the weight that seemed to press down on his shoulders as he poured himself a glass of amber liquid and stared out into the darkness. In that moment, despite everything, she felt a flicker of compassion for this broken man who had lost his wife and now faced losing his daughter. Tomorrow would be her first full day back in the lion's den, and somehow she needed to find a way to survive it, not just for her own sake, but for Maya's as well. Morning light streamed through the east-facing windows of the Sutton mansion, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Amelia had been awake since 4:30, determined to prove herself indispensable on her first official day as Amy Collins. She moved through the silent house with practiced efficiency, dusting surfaces that already gleamed, arranging flowers with mathematical precision, and memorizing the exact placement of every object she touched. By 6:15, the scent of fresh coffee wafted through the kitchen. Brandon Sutton was known to rise at 6:30 without fail, taking his breakfast precisely 7 minutes later. Black coffee, 2 pieces of whole-grain toast with exactly 1 tablespoon of organic almond butter, and a bowl of steel-cut oats with measured portions of blueberries and almonds. No variations, no exceptions. "You've arranged the fruit incorrectly," were his first words to her as he entered the breakfast nook at 6:37, his voice devoid of any morning pleasantries. "Blueberries go on the left side of the bowl, not scattered throughout." Amelia bit the inside of her cheek. "I apologize, Mr. Sutton, it won't happen again." His eyes, the color of winter sky, assessed her with clinical detachment. "Margaret says you have excellent references." "Yes, sir. 7 years of experience with the Henderson family in Greenwich, and 3 with the Wilsons in Boston. These were fabrications Margaret had helped her construct, complete with phone numbers that would redirect to burner phones should Brandon choose to verify her employment history. Amelia felt a twinge of guilt at the deception, but it disappeared when she thought of Maya's solemn face. "The Hendersons," Brandon mused, taking a careful sip of his coffee. "Richard Henderson's pharmaceutical company went public last year. Quite the success story." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't anticipated he would know the family she'd claimed to work for. "Yes, they were very good to me. And yet you left their employment." "Mrs. Henderson passed away," Amelia improvised, watching his face carefully. "The household changed after that." Something flickered in Brandon's eyes, a momentary crack in his armor that vanished so quickly, Amelia wondered if she'd imagined it. He set down his coffee cup with mathematical precision. "My daughter takes her breakfast at 7:30. She eats in her room. Margaret will show you her dietary requirements. Under no circumstances are you to deviate from them." He stood, adjusting his already perfect tie. "I'll be home at 7 this evening. Dinner should be ready at 7:15. After he left, Amelia released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Margaret appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Well, you survived the first encounter," she said. "That's more than I can say for the last one." She was in tears before he finished his coffee. "He's not as intimidating as he thinks he is," Amelia lied, gathering Brandon's breakfast dishes. Margaret's eyebrow arched. "Isn't he? Then you're either braver or more foolish than I thought." She handed Amelia a printed sheet. Maya's dietary requirements. The oncologist adjusts it weekly based on her blood work and treatment schedule. Today, she needs protein and iron. Her counts were low at yesterday's appointment. Amelia scanned the clinical document, her heart sinking at the medical terminology that painted a picture of Maya's struggle in cold, scientific language. How is she really doing? Medically, I mean. Better than 3 months ago. Worse than they'd hoped. Margaret's voice lowered. The chemotherapy is aggressive. She's lost weight she couldn't afford to lose, and the hair... She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. But she's fighting. Tougher than she looks. At 7:25, Amelia stood outside Maya's bedroom door, balancing a tray containing a small protein smoothie, scrambled eggs with spinach, and whole grain toast cut into star shapes. A small creative liberty she hoped wouldn't be noticed or reported. She knocked softly. "Come in," called a small voice. Maya's bedroom was a study in contrasts. The space had clearly been designed as a princess fantasy. Pale pink walls, a canopy bed with delicate tulle curtains, and shelves filled with dolls and stuffed animals. Yet medical supplies cluttered the nightstand, and a wheelchair sat folded in the corner, a stark reminder of the battle being waged within these fairy tale walls. Maya sat cross-legged on her bed, a collection of colorful wigs spread around her like exotic flowers. She wore a simple white nightgown, her bare head making her look even smaller and more vulnerable than Amelia remembered. When she looked up, surprise registered in her eyes. "You came back," she said, her voice a mixture of confusion and wonder. "But you have different hair." Amelia's hand went to her newly dyed brown hair, cut shorter than her natural blonde locks had been. Another suggestion from Margaret to complete her transformation into Amy Collins. "Yes, I wanted a change," Amelia said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "I'm Amy now. Amy Collins." Maya studied her with the penetrating gaze of a child who had been forced to become wise beyond her years. "No, you're not," she said simply. "You're the lady who broke Mommy's vase. But you're pretending, aren't you? Like when I wear my wigs and pretend I still have hair." Amelia froze, caught between the instinct to maintain her cover story and an unwillingness to lie to this perceptive child. "Your father doesn't know," she admitted quietly, "and I'd appreciate if you didn't tell him." "I won't," Maya promised, picking up a blonde wig with gentle curls. "I'm good at keeping secrets. Daddy doesn't like to talk about sad things, so I pretend I'm not sad." She held the wig up to the light. "This one looks most like my real hair used to be, before it all fell out." Amelia sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the wig. Maya handed it over, and Amelia examined the synthetic curls. "It's beautiful, but I think it might be too big for you." "They're all too big," Maya said, with the resigned disappointment of someone used to life's small cruelties. "The lady at the store said they don't make wigs for children with cancer, only for adults who want to look pretty. That doesn't seem fair. Daddy says life isn't fair. That's why Mommy had to go to heaven, and that's why I got sick." Maya reached for her smoothie, taking a small sip. "You made my toast into stars. Is that okay? I can cut new pieces if you prefer." A hint of a smile touched Maya's lips. "I like stars. Mommy used to say I was her little star." The smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. "Do you think Daddy will be mad about the stars?" The question, asked with such genuine concern, broke something inside Amelia. The idea that this child, battling a life-threatening illness, would worry about her father's reaction to star-shaped toast spoke volumes about the atmosphere of fear that permeated the household. "It can be our secret," Amelia whispered, adopting a conspiratorial tone. "Sometimes, small joys are the most important ones to keep." As Maya ate her breakfast, she told Amelia about her collection of wigs, gifts from well-meaning relatives and her father's business associates who seemed determined to solve the problem of her baldness with money. None fit properly, all were uncomfortable, and Maya only wore them when her father had important visitors. "He doesn't like to see me without hair," she confided, her small fingers tracing patterns on the bedspread. I think it scares him. Sometimes he looks at me like he's seeing a ghost." Before Amelia could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "B left file in study. Coming back, ETA 10 minutes. Get out of M's room." "I have to go," Amelia said, gathering the breakfast tray. "But I'll be back tomorrow, okay?" Maya nodded, her eyes already drifting back to her collection of ill-fitting wigs, her brief moment of animation fading like mist in morning sun. That night, after Brandon had retired to his study with his customary glass of 25-year-old scotch, Amelia sat at her small desk in the staff quarters, a notepad before her. On it, she had written, "Child-sized wig, blonde, curly, custom fit." Below that, she had listed the balance of her savings account, her upcoming bills, and the difference between the two, a sobering figure that left little room for extras. Yet as she thought of Maya's face and the quiet dignity with which she carried her suffering, Amelia knew what she had to do. Tomorrow was payday. And while Brandon Sutton might control almost everything within the walls of his mansion, he couldn't control what Amelia did with her own money. The children's hospital was a riot of primary colors and forced cheer. Murals of cartoon characters lined the walls, their perpetual smiles at odds with the reality of the small patients who moved through the hallways, some in wheelchairs, others trailing IV poles like reluctant pets. Amelia had taken her one day off to come here, following a recommendation from Margaret, who knew more than she let on about sources for specialized pediatric medical supplies. "You must be Amy," said the woman who greeted her in the small office tucked away from the main pediatric oncology ward. Dr. Rebecca Chen was in her early 50s, with streaks of silver in her black hair, and laugh lines around eyes that had seen both heartbreaking loss and miraculous recoveries. Margaret called ahead. "You're looking for a custom wig for a 7-year-old girl." "Yes," Amelia confirmed, sinking into the offered chair. "She has all acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Her father buys her adult wigs, but none of them fit properly and they're uncomfortable for her." Dr. Chen nodded, her expression softening. "Children undergoing chemotherapy have particularly sensitive scalps. Adult wigs can cause irritation, not to mention the psychological impact of wearing something that clearly doesn't belong on them." She opened a drawer and pulled out a measuring tape. "I'll need exact measurements and preferably a photo of what her hair looked like before treatment." "I don't have a photo," Amelia admitted. "I've only been working for the family for a short time." "The father can't provide one?" Amelia hesitated. "He's not aware I'm doing this. He's very private about his daughter's condition." Understanding dawned in Dr. Chen's eyes. "I see. That's not uncommon, unfortunately. Some parents struggle to accept the visible manifestations of their child's illness." She tapped her pen thoughtfully against her desk. "Does the little girl have a favorite doll or photograph of herself? Something that shows her hair?" Amelia thought of the framed photograph she'd seen on Maya's nightstand, a smiling woman with the same deep brown eyes as Maya, holding a younger version of the girl. In the photo, Maya couldn't have been more than 5, her head a riot of golden curls that caught the sunlight. "There's a photo in her room. I could try to take a picture of it with my phone." "That would be perfect." Dr. Chen wrote something on a prescription pad. "These are the measurements I'll need. Circumference front to back, ear to ear. Try to be precise. A well-fitted wig makes all the difference." Amelia glanced at the figure Dr. Chen had written at the bottom of the page. Her heart sank. "That's the cost? For a custom pediatric human hair wig, yes. Insurance rarely covers them, considering them cosmetic." Dr. Chen's mouth twisted with barely concealed disdain for this designation. As if a child's psychological well-being is merely cosmetic. It was more than 2 weeks of Amelia's salary, money she had been saving for her own future, for the small business she dreamed of opening one day. But as she thought of Maya sitting cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by wigs that would never fit, the decision made itself. "How long will it take?" "Once I have the measurements and a reference photo, about 2 weeks. We work with a specialist who prioritizes pediatric cases." Dr. Chen's eyes crinkled with a smile. "You're doing a beautiful thing, you know. For many of these children, regaining even the appearance of what they've lost is incredibly healing." The next day, while Brandon was at work and Maya was resting after her weekly chemotherapy session, Amelia slipped into the girl's room with the measuring tape hidden in her pocket. Maya was asleep, her face peaceful in a way it rarely was when she was awake, gently so as not to wake her. Amelia took the measurements, her fingers trembling slightly, as she recorded the numbers on the paper Dr. Chen had given her. Before leaving, she used her phone to take a quick photo of the framed picture on the nightstand. Maya and her mother, both smiling, both with those remarkable golden curls that seemed to capture the light. As she turned to go, Maya stirred. "Amy?" she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "What are you doing?" "Just checking on you," Amelia whispered, quickly pocketing her phone. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. And my bones hurt." Maya pushed herself up slightly against her pillows. "Dr. Jenkins says that's normal after treatment, but I don't want to be normal like this. I want to be normal like before." Amelia sat on the edge of the bed, her heart aching. "I know, sweetheart. Will you tell me a story?" Maya asked, her eyelids already growing heavy again. "Mommy used to tell me stories when I felt bad after treatment." "Of course," Amelia said, though she hadn't expected the request. "What kind of story would you like to hear?" "One about a princess who loses something important, but finds something even better." Amelia's throat tightened. "Once upon a time," she began softly, "there was a princess with hair like spun gold that captured the sunlight. Everyone in the kingdom admired her beautiful hair, and the princess was very proud of it. But one day, a wicked spell caused all her hair to disappear." Maya's eyes fluttered open. "Like mine did." "Yes, like yours did," Amelia acknowledged gently. "The princess was very sad and thought that without her beautiful hair, no one would think she was special anymore. She hid away in her castle, not wanting anyone to see her." "Did her daddy stop loving her?" Maya asked, her voice so quiet Amelia almost didn't hear the question. The innocent query stabbed at Amelia's heart. "No, sweetheart. Her father loved her very much. But he was scared because he didn't know how to help her, and sometimes when grown-ups are scared, they don't show their love the right way." Maya seemed to consider this, her small fingers plucking at the edge of her blanket. "What happened to the princess?" "A kind fairy heard about the princess's sadness and decided to help. She worked day and night to create a magical crown of golden threads that looked exactly like the princess's hair. When the princess put it on, she felt beautiful again. But more importantly, she realized something." "What did she realize?" Maya's eyes were drooping despite her interest in the story. "She realized that what made her special was never her hair. It was her brave heart, her kind spirit, and her ability to find joy even in the hardest times. The magical crown helped her remember who she truly was, but the real magic had been inside her all along." By the time Amelia finished the story, Maya had drifted back to sleep, her breathing deep and even. Amelia gently tucked the blanket around her thin shoulders, fighting back tears. As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with Margaret standing in the doorway. "How long have you been there?" Amelia whispered, her heart racing. "Long enough," Margaret replied, her usual stern expression softened by something that might have been approval. "Come with me." In the hallway, Margaret pulled a small velvet pouch from her pocket. "Her mother's jewelry," she explained, opening the pouch to reveal a delicate gold locket. "There's a curl of Maya's hair inside, preserved before she began treatment. Her father keeps it locked away. Can't bear to look at it, but it might help with matching the color." Amelia stared at the older woman, understanding dawning. "You know what I'm doing. I've managed this household for 17 years, child. Very little happens that I don't know about." Margaret pressed the locket into Amelia's hand. "Return it before he notices it's gone. And be careful. You're walking a dangerous line." 2 weeks passed, during which Amelia settled into the rhythm of the Sutton household. Brandon remained distant and demanding, finding fault with minute details. A picture frame angled 2 degrees off-center, water spots on a crystal glass, a barely perceptible wrinkle in his bed linens. Yet Amelia weathered his criticism with a calm exterior that seemed to both irritate and intrigue him. "You don't react like the others," he remarked one evening as she cleared his dinner plate. "They would apologize profusely or burst into tears." "Would either response change your assessment of my work?" Amelia asked, meeting his gaze directly. For a moment, something like respect flickered in his eyes. "No." "Then I see little point in them." A ghost of a smile, so brief she might have imagined it, touched his lips before he turned away. With Maya, Amelia's relationship deepened. She began reading to the girl each evening after dinner, a ritual that sometimes extended past Maya's prescribed bedtime. If Brandon noticed these sessions or the growing attachment between his daughter and the new housekeeper, he made no comment. On Tuesdays, when Maya had her treatments, Amelia would prepare special meals designed to tempt her diminished appetite, sometimes shaped into stars or hearts or little animals that made the girl smile despite her nausea. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, a package arrived for Amelia. She signed for it with trembling hands, aware of Margaret watching from the doorway with knowing eyes. Inside was the wig Dr. Chen had commissioned, a perfect miniature version of the golden curls Maya had lost, made from real human hair and designed to fit her small head comfortably. Attached was a note. An anonymous donor contributed to the cost. There are more parents fighting this battle than you know. That night, after Brandon had sequestered himself in his study with a stack of reports and his customary glass of scotch, Amelia made her way to Maya's room, the carefully wrapped package hidden behind her back. "I have a surprise for you," she said, sitting on the edge of Maya's bed. Maya looked up from the book she'd been reading, her eyes brightening with curiosity. "What kind of surprise?" "The kind that might make you feel a little more like yourself." Amelia placed the package in Maya's lap. "Go ahead, open it." With careful fingers, Maya unwrapped the package, gasping when she saw what lay inside. The wig was exquisite, soft golden curls that caught the light exactly as her own hair once had. She lifted it reverently, her eyes wide with wonder. "It looks just like my real hair," she whispered, tears filling her eyes, "just like in the pictures with Mommy." "Would you like to try it on?" Amelia asked, her own vision blurring with unshed tears. Maya nodded eagerly, and Amelia helped position the wig carefully on her head, adjusting it until it sat perfectly. The transformation was remarkable. With her golden curls restored, Maya looked like the little girl in the photograph, vibrant, healthy, full of life. "There's a mirror in your bathroom," Amelia said. "Do you want to see?" Hand in hand they walked to the bathroom, where Maya stood transfixed before the mirror, touching the curls with trembling fingers. For a long moment, she said nothing, simply staring at her reflection, as if seeing a long-lost friend. "I look like me again," she finally whispered, a smile breaking across her face like sunrise. "Like the me before I got sick." The sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. They turned to find Brandon standing in the doorway, his tumbler of scotch in pieces at his feet, amber liquid seeping into the plush carpet. His face had drained of all color, his eyes fixed on his daughter with an expression of such raw pain that Amelia instinctively stepped between him and Maya. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Daddy, look." Maya twirled, the golden curls bouncing around her shoulders, her face alight with joy. "I look like me again. I look like Mommy." Brandon Sutton stood frozen, scotch soaking into the carpet around his feet, his face a battlefield of conflicting emotions. For an instant, Amelia saw naked grief flash across his features, as if he were seeing a ghost, the painful echo of his dead wife in his daughter's restored appearance. Then his expression hardened, the familiar mask of control sliding back into place. "Take it off," he ordered, his voice brittle as thin ice. "Now." Maya's smile crumpled. "But Daddy, I said take it off." The words exploded from him with such force that both Maya and Amelia flinched. "Who gave you permission to do this?" His gaze cut to Amelia, eyes blazing with cold fury. "Who do you think you are to make these decisions? To go behind my back?" Amelia placed a protective hand on Maya's shoulder, feeling the girl's small body begin to tremble. "Mr. Sutton, I only wanted—" "You're fired." The words sliced through the air. "Pack your things and be out of this house within the hour." "No," Maya cried, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't make Amy leave. She's my friend." Brandon's jaw tightened. "Maya, go to your room. I need to speak with Miss Collins alone." "Not until you tell me why." Maya's voice rose with a strength neither adult had heard from her in months. She clutched at the wig on her head, as if afraid her father might tear it away. "Why can't I look like me? Why don't you want me to be happy?" "This isn't about your happiness," Brandon snapped. "It's about following the rules of this household." "I hate the rules," Maya shouted, her small body rigid with emotion. "I hate them, and I hate being sick, and I hate that you can't even look at me anymore." Her voice broke on a sob. "Do you not love me anymore because I don't have hair? Because I don't look like Mommy?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Brandon's face went slack with shock, the anger draining from him so suddenly that he seemed to physically diminish, as if Maya's words had punctured something vital within him. "Maya," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "How could you think that?" "Because you never smile at me anymore," Maya said, tears streaming down her face. "You never hold me or tell me stories. You just make rules and talk to doctors and look sad when you think I'm not watching." She tugged at one of the golden curls. "But when I put this on, I thought maybe you'd see me again, the real me." Brandon sank slowly to his knees, heedless of the scotch soaking into his $500 trousers. For a moment, he seemed utterly lost, a man drowning in an ocean of his own making. Then, with trembling hands, he reached for his daughter. "Maya," he said, his voice breaking. "My sweet girl, I have always seen you. I've just been so afraid of losing you that I've been trying not to look too closely, because it hurts too much." As Maya stepped hesitantly into her father's embrace, Amelia moved quietly toward the door, feeling like an intruder in this private moment of reconciliation. But Brandon's voice stopped her. "Miss Crawford," he said, using her real name for the first time, "please stay." Amelia turned, surprised to find Brandon looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "You knew who I was all along?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I run a multinational corporation. Did you really think I wouldn't verify your background? The real Amy Collins died 23 years ago. Then why did you hire me? Because Margaret vouched for you, and because you were the first person to look at my daughter and see something other than her illness." His arms tightened around Maya. "I've forgotten how to do that." Later that night, after Maya had fallen asleep, still wearing her new wig, Brandon invited Amelia to his study. The room was a masculine sanctuary of leather and dark wood, walls lined with books that showed signs of actual reading rather than decorative display. He poured himself another scotch and, after a moment's hesitation, offered one to Amelia, which she declined. "How much did the wig cost?" he asked without preamble. "That's not important." "It is to me." He sat heavily in a leather armchair, the weight of the day evident in the slump of his shoulders. "You used your own money, didn't you?" Amelia nodded, uncomfortable with this line of questioning. "Mr. Sutton." "Brandon," he corrected quietly. "I think we're past formalities, don't you?" "Brandon," she amended, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "I didn't do it for recognition or reimbursement. I did it because Maya needed it. And I was too blind to see that." He stared into his glass, the amber liquid catching the light. "Do you know what it's like to watch someone you love disappear by inches? My wife, Caroline, died instantly. One moment she was here, the next gone. A drunk driver, a rainy night, a curve taken too fast." His voice was clinical, detached, as if he were reading from a police report rather than describing the destruction of his world. There was a strange mercy in that suddenness. No lingering, no false hopes. He took a long swallow of his scotch. "But with Maya it's different. Every day I watch for signs. Is she more tired? Is she eating less? Is that a bruise on her arm that wasn't there yesterday?" His hand tightened around the glass. "The doctors talk about 5-year survival rates and remission protocols, but all I can think is, what if tomorrow is the day she gets worse instead of better?" "So you created rules," Amelia said softly, "to control what you could in an uncontrollable situation. I thought if I could make everything else perfect, if I could eliminate every variable, every potential stress." He trailed off, then laughed bitterly. "Instead, I became the stress. I've been so focused on keeping her alive that I forgot to let her live. It's not too late to change that." Brandon looked up, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Why do you care so much? About Maya? About any of this?" Most people would have walked away after being fired the first time. Amelia considered the question, searching for an answer that wouldn't reveal too much of her own heart. "When I was 12, my mother got sick. Cancer. Like Maya. There were no wigs or special treatments. We couldn't afford them. What I remember most was how people stopped seeing her. They saw the disease, the tragedy, the cautionary tale, but not her." She twisted her hands in her lap. "No one deserves to disappear while they're still here." A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Finally, Brandon set down his glass. "I'd like you to stay," he said. "Not as a housekeeper, as whatever Maya needs you to be." "And what do you need me to be?" The question surprised them both. Brandon looked at her as if seeing her clearly for the first time, not as an employee or even as his daughter's champion, but as a woman who had broken through the walls he'd so carefully constructed. "Someone who tells me the truth," he answered quietly, "even when I don't want to hear it." The weeks that followed brought subtle but significant changes to the Sutton household. The rigid schedules remained. Maya's medical needs demanded certain routines, but within those structures, joy began to find its way back in. Brandon started joining his daughter for breakfast, listening with genuine interest as she chatted about her books or the birds she'd spotted from her window. On good days, when her energy allowed, they would take short walks in the garden, Maya proudly wearing her wig despite the heat. Amelia found her role shifting in ways she hadn't anticipated. She was no longer just an employee, but something closer to family. She still managed the household, but she also accompanied Maya to treatments when Brandon had unavoidable work commitments, held the girl's hand through the worst of the nausea, and celebrated the small victories. A good blood count, an extra spoonful of dinner eaten, a night of uninterrupted sleep. And then there was Brandon. The walls he had built came down slowly, brick by stubborn brick. He began asking Amelia's opinion on matters beyond household management. Maya's care, business decisions, even which tie to wear to an important meeting. Sometimes she would catch him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat faster, though he would quickly look away when their eyes met. One evening in late autumn, as golden leaves skittered across the lawn, Dr. Jenkins arrived for his monthly assessment of Maya's progress. These visits always left Brandon tense and irritable, regardless of the news. Today, he paced the hallway outside Maya's room while the doctor conducted his examination, his face tight with anxiety. "She seemed tired this morning," he said to Amelia, who waited with him. "More than usual, and she barely touched her breakfast." "She was excited about the visit from her cousin this weekend," Amelia reminded him gently. "Sometimes emotional excitement affects her physical energy." Brandon nodded but continued pacing. When Dr. Jenkins finally emerged, his expression was unreadable. "Well?" Brandon demanded. "How is she?" "Let's discuss this in your study," the doctor suggested, his tone neutral. "Maya is resting now." The walk to the study felt like a death march. Brandon's face had gone pale, his hand seeking Amelia's in an unconscious gesture that surprised them both. She squeezed his fingers reassuringly, though her own heart was pounding with fear. Once the door closed behind them, Dr. Jenkins turned to face them, his professional mask softening into a smile. "I have good news, Brandon. Very good news." Brandon seemed unable to speak, so Amelia asked, "What is it, doctor?" "Maya's latest bone marrow biopsy shows no detectable cancer cells. Her blood counts are approaching normal ranges, and her organ function tests are excellent." He placed a hand on Brandon's shoulder. "She's in remission, Brandon. Complete remission." The world seemed to stop. Brandon made a sound, half laugh, half sob, his body swaying slightly as if the news had physical weight. Amelia steadied him, her own eyes filling with tears of joy. "Are you certain?" Brandon finally managed, his voice raw. "There's no mistake. We'll continue monitoring her closely, of course, and she'll need maintenance therapy for another year to ensure the cancer doesn't return. But yes, I'm certain." Dr. Jenkins smiled broadly. "You have every reason to be hopeful. Children with all who achieve complete remission at this stage have excellent long-term prognoses." After the doctor left, Brandon stood motionless in the center of his study, seemingly unable to process the magnitude of what he'd just heard. Amelia moved to leave, wanting to give him space to absorb the news, but he caught her wrist. "Stay," he whispered. "Please." When she turned back to him, she was startled to see tears streaming down his face, the first she had ever witnessed from this controlled, compartmentalized man. Without thinking, she reached up to brush them away, her fingers gentle against his cheek. "She's going to be okay," she said softly. "Maya's going to be okay." Brandon captured her hand against his face, his eyes closing briefly at her touch. When he opened them again, they were clear and certain in a way she had never seen before. "I love you," he said simply, the words falling between them like stones into still water. "I don't know when it happened or how, but somewhere between breaking my wife's vase and buying my daughter a wig, I fell in love with you." Amelia stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. This wasn't what she had expected, wasn't what she had allowed herself to imagine during those quiet moments when she caught him watching her. "Brandon, You don't have to say anything," he interrupted quickly. "I know this is sudden and completely inappropriate given our working relationship. I just needed you to know. Today of all days, when everything seems possible again, I couldn't keep it inside anymore." In the silence that followed his declaration, they could hear the distant sound of Maya's laughter drifting from upstairs, the full-bodied, carefree laughter of a child who had just been told she was getting better. It was the most beautiful sound Amelia had ever heard, and in that moment, with that joyful sound washing over them, Amelia did the only thing that felt right. She leaned forward and pressed her lips to Brandon's in a kiss that spoke of new beginnings, second chances, and the kind of hope that blooms even in the darkest of winters. Spring arrived with a riot of color and light that seemed to mirror the transformation within the Sutton mansion. The gardens, once maintained with military precision, now welcomed wildflowers among the carefully planned beds, a deliberate concession to beauty over control that Brandon had surprised Amelia with one morning. "Life finds a way," he had said, quoting one of Maya's favorite movies as they watched butterflies dance among the unruly blooms. "I'm learning to let it." Maya's recovery continued steadily through the winter and into the warmer months. Her strength returned in small increments. First, the ability to walk up the stairs without pausing for breath, then a full day of homeschooling without needing a nap. And finally, the joyous morning when Dr. Jenkins announced she could return to school part-time in the fall. "My hair is growing back," she announced one Sunday morning, running her fingers over the soft golden fuzz that had begun to cover her head. The wig sat on her dresser now, used occasionally for special occasions, but no longer a daily necessity. "It feels different than before, softer, like baby duck feathers," Amelia agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of Maya's head. The gesture came naturally now, part of the physical affection that had become commonplace in a household once starved for touch. Brandon looked up from his newspaper, his eyes crinkling with the smile that had once been so rare, but now appeared daily. "You know what this means, don't you? Time for a celebration." Maya's eyes widened. "The beach house. You promised when I got better we could go to the beach house." "I did promise that, didn't I?" Brandon pretended to consider it carefully, though Amelia knew he had already arranged for the vacation home in the Hamptons to be opened and prepared. "I suppose we could go next weekend, if Amelia can join us, of course." Maya turned to Amelia with pleading eyes. "You'll come, won't you? Daddy says the beach house has the most beautiful sunsets in the world." "I wouldn't miss it for anything," Amelia assured her, exchanging a warm glance with Brandon over Maya's head. Their relationship had evolved gradually over the past 6 months, careful and considerate of Maya's central place in both their lives. What had begun with that impulsive kiss in Brandon's study had deepened into something neither had expected to find, a partnership built on shared challenges, mutual respect, and a love that had grown from the fertile ground of their dedication to Maya. They had decided early on to be honest with Maya about their feelings for each other. One evening after dinner, they had sat her down and explained that they had grown to care deeply for one another. "Like love?" Maya had asked immediately, her perceptiveness as sharp as ever. "Yes," Brandon had admitted, reaching for Amelia's hand. "Like love." Maya had considered this for a long moment, her expression serious. Then she had smiled, that radiant, full-bodied smile that had been absent during her illness. "Good," she had declared. "Our family was too small anyway." The beach house exceeded even Amelia's expectations. Perched on a dune overlooking the Atlantic, the structure was surprisingly modest for a man of Brandon's wealth, a weathered, cedar-shingled cottage with a wide porch and windows that captured both sunrise and sunset. Inside, the decor spoke of family memories rather than designer aesthetics. Shelves filled with seashells collected over years of visits, faded photographs of Maya building sandcastles, and handmade pottery that Caroline had collected from local artisans. This was her favorite place, Brandon explained quietly as they unpacked. Maya having already raced down to the beach with strict instructions not to go near the water until they joined her. "We came here every summer since Maya was born. Last year was the first time we didn't." Amelia understood the significance of his bringing her here, to this sanctuary of family memories. It was both an introduction to the past he cherished and an invitation into his future. The weekend unfolded in a haze of simple pleasures, morning walks along the shoreline, afternoons building elaborate sand structures that Maya insisted were not mere castles, but entire kingdoms, and evenings watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost too vibrant to be real. Maya's energy, while not fully restored to pre-illness levels, allowed her to enjoy each day with minimal rest periods, a miracle that neither adult took for granted. On their final evening, after Maya had fallen asleep exhausted from a day of sun and sea air, Brandon led Amelia to the porch. A bottle of wine waited on the small table between two Adirondack chairs, already poured into glasses that caught the light of the setting sun. "Thank you for this weekend," Amelia said, settling into one of the chairs. "It's been magical. Thank you for being here." Brandon's voice was soft as he took the seat beside her. "For being part of our lives. For saving us both." "I didn't save you," Amelia protested gently. "You saved yourselves. You and Maya. You gave us the chance to do it." Brandon reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I had planned to wait, to do this with some elaborate gesture, but sitting here watching the sunset over the ocean, where Caroline and I brought Maya as a baby, where we built all our happiest memories, it feels right to begin our next chapter in this place." Amelia's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a ring, not a flashy diamond as might be expected from a man of his wealth, but a simple band of rose gold holding a pearl surrounded by tiny sapphires, the colors echoing the sunset sea before them. "I love you, Amelia Crawford," Brandon said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. "You walked into our broken home and showed us how to be whole again. You loved my daughter as your own from the first moment. You stood up to me when I needed it most." He took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "I can't imagine our lives without you in them. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Amelia's vision as she looked from the ring to the man holding it. This man who had transformed from a tyrannical employer to a loving father, from a grief-hardened widower to a partner who cherished her strength as much as her tenderness. "Yes," she whispered, the word carried away by the ocean breeze. Then louder, with all the certainty in her heart, "Yes, I will marry you." As Brandon slipped the ring onto her finger, a small voice came from the doorway behind them. "I knew it." Maya stood there in her pajamas, her growing hair tousled from sleep, her smile illuminating her face. "I've been wishing for this since Christmas." Brandon laughed, opening his arms to his daughter, who rushed forward to join them. "Were you spying on us, little miss?" "Not spying," Maya corrected with dignity. "Just happening to be in the right place at exactly the right time." Amelia pulled her into a tight embrace. "And how do you feel about it? About us becoming a family officially?" Maya looked at her with those wise brown eyes that had seen more suffering than any child should know, yet still held a capacity for joy that humbled both adults. "We already are a family," she said simply. "This just means you can't ever leave us." "Never," Amelia promised, kissing the top of Maya's head as Brandon's arms encircled them both. "I will never leave you." 1 year later, on a perfect June day, Amelia walked down an aisle of rose petals scattered across the sand of that same beach. Maya preceded her as flower girl, her golden curls, now fully grown back, crowned with a circlet of wildflowers. The guests were few but cherished. Margaret beaming with uncharacteristic emotion, Dr. Jenkins and Dr. Chen, whose expertise had saved Maya's life, and a handful of friends who had supported them through the darkest days. Brandon waited at the end of the aisle, tall and handsome in a light linen suit, his eyes never leaving Amelia as she approached in a simple white dress that caught the sea breeze. Beside him stood Maya, who had insisted on being both flower girl and her father's best person. "Because I'm the one who brings him the rings, and the one who knows him best," she had argued with impeccable logic. As Amelia reached them, Brandon took her hands in his eyes reflecting all the love and gratitude that words could never fully express. Maya moved to stand between them, completing their circle. "Before we begin," the officiant said with a smile, "Maya has asked to say something." Maya stepped forward, her voice clear and confident as she addressed the small gathering. "Once upon a time there was a little girl who got very sick. She lost her golden hair and thought she had lost her father's love too. But then a kind fairy came to the castle disguised as a housekeeper." She grinned up at Amelia. "She bought the princess a magical crown of golden threads that helped her remember who she really was. But the real magic wasn't in the crown at all. It was in the fairy's heart, which was big enough to love both the princess and her sad father." Tears gathered in Amelia's eyes as Maya continued. "The fairy helped the king remember how to smile again, and she helped the princess fight the wicked spell that was making her sick. And when the princess got better, the three of them became a family, proving that sometimes the happiest endings come after the saddest beginnings." As the simple ceremony continued, with vows exchanged and rings blessed, Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From broken vase to broken hearts, from impossible standards to unconditional love, from fear of loss to celebration of life, They had travelled a path none of them could have imagined that first day in the marble hallway of the Sutton mansion. Later, as the reception continued around them, Brandon pulled Amelia away for a quiet moment at the water's edge. The setting sun painted the ocean in shades of gold and rose, a backdrop so beautiful it seemed almost deliberately arranged for their happiness. "Do you know what today is?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. Amelia laughed. "Our wedding day. Besides that, it's exactly 2 years since you broke Caroline's vase." His eyes crinkled with the smile that now came so naturally to him. "The worst and best day of my life, though I didn't know it then." "You were quite terrifying," Amelia admitted, leaning into his embrace. "I never imagined we'd end up here." "I think perhaps Caroline did," Brandon said softly. "She always believed that love finds a way, even through the darkest times. Maybe she sent you to us, knowing you were exactly what we needed." Before Amelia could respond, Maya came running toward them. Her dress hiked up to her knees to avoid the incoming tide. "Come quick," she called. "Margaret is about to cut the cake, and she says, if you're not there in 30 seconds, she's giving my piece to Dr. Jenkins." As they walked back toward the celebration hand in hand, with Maya skipping ahead of them, Amelia felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. This was her family now. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole and healing and filled with the kind of love that transforms lives. From a broken vase to a mended heart, from a wig that restored a child's smile to a ring that promised forever, their story had unfolded in ways none of them could have predicted. And as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Amelia knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning of their happily ever after. If you've made it this far, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It's just 2 clicks for you, but it means so much to me. Comment what you thought of the story. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with me until the end. See you next time.